Welcome to Montana's Peer Network Recovery Talks podcast. I'm Jim Haney.
And I'm Leah Wetzel.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Recovery Talks. We are covering Mental Health Awareness Month, and this I think this is the last one of the month. Been covering all these different topics on mental health awareness. And on this particular one, Lee and I are going to be talking about trauma-informed training, trauma-informed care, trauma-informed responses, that kind of thing, because recently you went to a training, right?
That's right, Jim. So I seen it last year. I seen an application or something come out in the SAMHSA Gain Center newsletter. I seen the first set come out taking applications for organizations or agencies, entities that are working within the criminal justice system to train the whole organization on trauma-informed responses. And then not too long after that, I seen one come out for individuals. And so it was kind of felt like a same platform as like if you're putting in for a grant, because you have to have like letters of reference, and it's a long application. And I guess they had like 87% higher applications come in. And so when I found out got in, I was really excited.
That's great. So the training is the SAMHSA Gain Center for Behavioral Health and Justice Transfer.
Bless you.
Excuse me. Boy, that came out of nowhere. Sorry about that. SAMHSA Gain Center for Behavioral Health Justice Transformation. If you don't know about SAMHSA's Gain Center, that's the portion of SAMHSA that focuses on justice system transformation stuff. Lots of stuff, lots of good stuff. The Gain Center offers training, helps educate criminal justice professionals about the impact of trauma and how to develop trauma-informed responses. This is right off the website. If you do a search, samhsa.gov/gains center, GAINS-center, that'll come up, and then you can just click on the trauma training. And so, yeah, this training's been around, and it's kind of cool because on here they have you can actually look up who the trainers are across the nation. And so, yeah, they have a map of the US. You can click on your state and you can see kind of like who's trained in that area. And the Gain Center's been at this for a long time. I can remember when we first started MPN 12 years ago, finding out about the Gain Center, I don't know, maybe 2013 or kind of a couple years into what we were doing. And going to some of their webinars. And then I think over the years, we've had, different levels of contact. But I think this is the biggest thing we've really done with them is this training that you went to. So what are a couple takeaways? First, how long is the training?
So the training was 16 hours. So it was 2 8-hour sessions. The first day they give us there's now, as a trainer, there's an administrative training that's 2 hours, and then there's a training for everybody else that's 4 hours for really any workforce. So what they do the first day is they go through a rundown. They offer the training to us, like a quick going through the modules. And then the next half of the day is the facilitator part of the training.
Actually training you to do the training. Yeah, because this is a train the trainer. How Being trauma informed improves criminal justice system responses. Train the trainer event is designed to train participants on a training delivery described, as well as equip them with the skills and resources necessary in order to deliver these effective trainings. So what are a couple of your takeaways from this training? Like, you just finished it up recently, so it's fresh in your mind.
Yeah, I think the first takeaway was, I mean, I think there was 38 of us in that first session, which they do, I think, 4 different actual trainings, 3 or 4. There's just the broad dynamics of people there that they picked. There was anywhere from like captains of the police force to detectives to peer support, just all over the nation. And the second thing was there was only 2 of us from Montana, and looking at the website, there's only 2 people in my community, me and another lady who's actually used to be my drug court coordinator.
Oh.
Are the 2 trainers from Great Falls. But
okay.
It's, if you've gone through PS 101, then you got a good idea of trauma-informed responses. It was a lot of reiterating what we learned there. And I think the training really, with the focus of the justice system, because like questions that my boss has asked, is this training for peer support? Is this training? This training's for any workforce. But like Samsa said, peer support get it a lot more than the justice system spaces
right.
It.
Well, the justice system tends to be very punitive, and there's right and wrong and kind of black and white. And because this is aimed specifically at the criminal justice system. So you were saying there's detectives were there, captains for police forces, that kind of thing.
And then I think my third top takeaway is, with doing that work with the Attorney General and Department of Justice within the last year and a half, really working on, House Bill 112 and, what are the main things we need to focus on in that area of work. The whole back of the manual is strategic planning sessions for communities to really collaborate. And it really brought back, if we can have a trauma-informed space to listen to survivors, DOJ, and Attorney General's office, that really gives us hope. And it gave me hope to be on that platform training with similar people from similar backgrounds.
So now that you've finished this, what's the next kind of thing? What would happen now?
So the next step is they want you to get out and train. So I think, being able to bring this to, under NPN focused peer support. But I think it's really important to have it being shared in the justice system. One of the ideas I had, I spoke to some folks up in Browning that we did an event with last year that work within reentry. And I said, I took this training. Would you guys be interested if we were able to get funding and fund it? Or would you, if we could get past that part, would you guys be interested? And they're like, oh, yeah. And it's anywhere I bring it up, people are really interested. So I think sharing the education and knowledge that I learned in there.
Well, you were talking about the community, I mean, that's the goal, right? Is to and it's hard because you're talking about, when you're talking about community, those of us who work in, we work in recovery, which is connected to behavioral health, and in that field, it's much more common, right? And especially like you said, like Sam's is saying, peer supporters get it. It's just kind of part of the recovery process. But when you start talking about a community, that can look a lot different because that's branching out now into other areas. So like criminal justice, this is a little more foreign to them and it's not built into the system. And we were talking earlier about some of the communities in Great Falls, and there's a lot more shooting, or some of the communities across Montana, like Great Falls.
Yeah.
And I mentioned like Billings, a lot more shootings, like more violent crimes we're seeing.
Yes.
And so how do we access those communities and get something like this? Because we can stay within peer support and keep training the same people sort of over and over and over again, but really that's not transforming the greater community.
Yes. Yes. Like I feel so definitely Great Falls, where I'm from, we've been having rise in shootings, stabbing. There was just a stabbing in my back alleyway. My cameras caught it, so I was able to help out a little bit. But that's traumatic.
Yeah.
And I feel so. A couple of the shootings, there was no gun. And I think
shootings by police.
Yeah. There was no gun on the other end. And I think there's a lot of power in educating the justice system on this outlook, on this way of life, really. De-escalating a situation, just talking to somebody versus, we know as peer support, we know there's power in just visiting with somebody.
Right.
Just meeting them where they're at.
Right.
And I think there's so many young law enforcement, they're scared. And a lot of the law enforcement, they're not kids that grew up in the hard neighborhoods. They're maybe kids that, and I say kids respectfully, younger generation that's, maybe they're not from that neighborhood. Maybe they don't know how it is. And they just want to help, which is great. But give them the right tools. And part of those tools, I believe, is education like this. And I'm excited because I actually get to share some of this. I have 45 minutes, but at the Law Enforcement Academy in July, I get to.
Excellent. Yeah. New recruits.
Yeah, brand new.
Yeah.
Get them while they're fresh.
Right. They're doing their post training. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something we're seeing. It's been about a decade now of, the mass shootings. I mean, and it's hard to understand that for me. It's something that I research, and whenever there's a mass shooting, I read about it to try and I'm always trying to understand what's happened here, because that's not something that when I went to high school, let's just say, late 80s, we weren't worried about mass shooters walking into the school. That just didn't exist. Like maybe there was a couple a year or something across the nation, but that really wasn't something that we were focused on. And today it's commonplace. I mean, there's already been, we're only in May, and I think there's been like over 200 mass shootings in the country, and we're only in May.
That's scary. Same here. We didn't have that stuff even in the 90s. We didn't have that stuff going on in the schools.
So it's like there's something happening, right? Like and to me, the reason I'm kind of going in this direction with the conversation is because it's related to mental health.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can be healthy mentally and be going to a school or a shopping mall, or, recently that's what we've been seeing in elementary school, people going into these schools and shooting innocent people.
Right.
To me, the focus should be on trauma and people's mental health.
Yes.
There's something going on here that's the response that's coming out because of they were bullied at the elementary school, and now they're a young adult and they're getting a hold of guns and they're going, and we're blaming guns. And to me, we should be talking about people's mental health and their trauma response. To me, this is a response to whatever's going on internally to them. There's some sort of discourse, and they're lashing out at not law enforcement. They're
The schools.
a school, in a place where you're going, where kids, young people are going, whether you're in elementary, junior high, high school, it doesn't matter. You're going there to learn. You're like, this is a huge part of your life in your first 18 years. And to not feel safe, now you're creating a trauma response in all of those kids and those young people, because now there's this fear in their mind. I'm going to school today. Am I going to get shot in school?
Right.
So it's like now it's creating a whole different level of trauma for people. And it's, like there's an awareness around things like bullying. But now it's like, oh, is somebody going to walk into the school and right? And all I hear about is, hey, let's put more police around the school. Let's put more security.
Yep.
And to me, we need to talk about people's mental health.
Definitely. Same with our school district. I don't know how many, so we get a text when the school's in lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know how many texts we've gotten just in this last year.
A
lot. And so both my kids have behavioral health conditions,
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
both
Mm-hmm.
have that. And so, so many times they come home all upset because they just weren't heard, or,
Mm-hmm.
the way things are set up. And
Mm-hmm.
these schools, this is, 80% of the time of where our kids are at.
Mm-hmm.
They spend a lot of time with our kids. Some of them, my stepdad was a teacher and a coach in the Great Falls School District for like 50 years, maybe more years.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the first one to ever teach me trauma-informed responses
Mm-hmm.
with my kids, just sharing little things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some funding, he said, that came out a while back. And he said his school really ate up getting the training,
Mm-hmm.
but there are certain other schools that were like in the same school district
Mm-hmm.
that were like, this is a waste of our time.
Well,
this is the outcome of the waste of their time.
Yeah.
If they just had a space, like in my kids' 504, my daughters, I should have it on my son's now because he's starting to have more issues with how they deal with kids
Mm-hmm.
with mental health conditions.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is a school, that's not our problem.
Mm-hmm.
But with my daughter, we have it written in there that she has a safe space to go to if she's feeling overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
If they just had a little bit of knowledge of
Mm-hmm.
how helpful trauma-informed support can be.
Mm-hmm.
And our police force, that's what they're doing. They're beefing up, having the police come into the schools,
which can cause anxiety in and of itself.
Yeah.
When you have more police presence around, it tends to not have the effect of making people feel safer. It has the opposite effect of putting people on edge, because they know then that means there's something wrong.
Yeah. Especially little kids, the anxiety. My son said the other day that he's like, Mom, I feel like I'm constantly doing something wrong the way they talk to us.
Mm-hmm.
And the anxiety of those kids. And they see it. I know I did. I still do. I see a policeman and I think, oh, there must be something going on.
Right.
And the kids, they feed off that even more.
Right. Exactly. The tension, they feel that through their parents. I'm curious about you mentioned the school, they send these texts, they go on lockdown. How does that impact you as a parent? So you're at work, you're at home, whatever's going on in your life, and all of a sudden, beep, beep, you get this, right? Bling, bling, and then you read it, and what happens in you? What's your response?
I get anxiety. I start stressing. I text my kids, "Are you guys okay?" Um, a couple times my son was home when they had it,
Mhm.
which I was grateful,
Mhm.
but you never know what's going on, especially with all these things, the uprise and shootings, the uprise and violence,
Mhm.
violent crimes,
Mhm.
just in my community alone, let alone across the nation.
Mhm.
It's scary.
Yeah.
A lot of times, especially in the past like 4 months, I'm like, what if we just did homeschool?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
this is getting to be too much.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I mean, the communication, there's a lot of lack of communication just under the schools
Mhm.
roof.
Mhm. Do they
I,
text you when the lockdown's over?
yeah, they text us when the lockdown's over. But I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is get everybody on the same page and like what is share is there a to do? Is there like what goes on when this stuff happens? Maybe share with the families, with the parents, because we
Mhm.
do worry.
Mhm.
We
Sure.
don't know what's going on. And
Right.
one of the things I was going to share, my son said, "Oh, Mom, they said next year they might be adding a metal detector."
Right. Right.
And I'm like,
Right.
what? To say to a kid, "Hey, what are you doing over there? What are you guys doing?" Because there's uprising vaping.
Mm.
And so the kids all migrate in the bathroom. But if a kid's not doing something and you're blaming them for something,
Mhm.
that's not
Mhm.
very good either.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, there's like multiple
Things
layers.
going on.
Yeah. And there's multiple layers. So we're talking about communities and trauma responses. I mean, here's a different, when we say community, we're using it in a different context. The school community, the community of the school, which is within the bigger community of, in this case, Great Falls. But there's a whole level of trauma responses that are happening there too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the kids, the parents, the teachers, right? There's other administrative staff. There's an impact to them too.
Yeah.
And I mean, why do you think it is that we as a society, we're so afraid to talk about mental health?
Man, I don't know. Shame, guilt, fear of the unknown. I mean, my mom's generation was definitely like, I grew up in a home where it was like kids are to be seen and not heard. And,
Mhm. Mhm.
now I'm sure not at the same level that it was for her as a kid.
Mhm.
But I mean, you just didn't ask and you didn't tell.
Mhm.
And so I always struggled because I'm somebody that talks.
Mhm.
And if something doesn't feel right,
Yeah.
or I'm going to
Yeah.
talk about it.
Yeah.
But those hard topics are the topics we need to talk about.
Yeah.
And by not talking about that with our kids, imagine how I know how I feel when all this stuff's going on in the community, or
Yeah.
I don't even see all of what's going on in the school.
Right.
But if they don't have us to talk to about it, to vent to, or educate them on, and maybe it's not with us, maybe it's with the counselor, maybe it's a peer group, that type of
Right.
thing. But it's so important to talk about those hard topics.
Yeah. Do you think we should have um, classes in our, like, let's say high school, let's say upperclassmen high school? Should we have classes where the class is mental well-being, mental health, whatever you want to call it? Then you could have sub chapters, could be like trauma, for example.
Yeah.
Like, how would you feel about that as a parent? Like, if we had classes like that? I mean,
Oh, that would be awesome. Being a parent, we're not born with we don't get a guide or a
yeah,
owner's manual.
yeah, yeah,
But I think being able to learn for the kids for the parents, for the school, for the community to learn skills or just have a safe place to talk about it.
Right.
I mean, it takes a tribe of people to keep me where I'm at.
Mhm.
Everybody should have that,
Mhm.
you know?
And maybe if we started teaching young people, let's say high school, then they eventually become the parents, right? But if they learn that when they're younger, that just becomes part of their own upbringing and their ways and their culture, right? And um, just seems like we just have a tough time talking about that subject matter, like. And I don't know why, because I think back to when I got into recovery in the 90s, it was all taboo. I mean, recovery, you weren't open about that. You didn't talk about it. You didn't talk about substance use or mental health, or you know what I mean? It was sort of, and it's come so far.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very open, television shows and movies, and there's people in recovery, and the awareness is higher than it's ever been. That's my experience over the last, 30 years, let's say. But yet we're still missing, I think, some of these fundamental places like schools where we're integrating these kinds of things so that there is this awareness about your mental health, about the impact of trauma, because there are kids right now who are in high school who will become the future police officers.
Yeah.
They will become the future judges. They will become the future attorney general and governor and all these, right, corrections officers, all of it. So if we want to change the system, it seems like we need to start with young people and start bringing them up in a different way so that we can have a future generation that is trauma informed.
Yes.
Right. Like, and I'm not sure why. I mean, it's a question that I don't know the answer to myself, of why are we so hesitant to talk about mental health? We raise awareness for things like cancer, breast cancer awareness, colon cancer awareness, skin cancer, right? Like when we were kids in the summertime, right? The weather's getting nice. I mean, you just be outside all day getting burned and like, right? But now it's like the weather gets better. It's like, oh, I better put my sunblock on.
My SPF 50.
Exactly, right? Right? Because we don't want to get skin like, but how did that happen? It happened because we started educating people.
Yes.
And we started saying, hey, there's potential danger here if you don't do it, right? And it's like, it feels like that's what we need to do with mental health. I think about the professional sports teams. I think it's October is the month they wear pink, right? And the pink thing is about raising awareness around breast cancer. It's common. It's like every year now. Football players, they're wearing pink gloves and pink socks and pink towels, and right. But we raise the awareness. Hey, this is something we should be taken seriously, and we need to get checked, and we need to talk about these things, and right. And we celebrate survivors and all of that. And we're sitting here in Mental Health Awareness Month. I don't see baseball players wearing colors to celebrate mental health awareness. I don't see hockey players. I don't see, you don't see signs in businesses and stuff. And it's like that, to me, like where we need to get to. We need to raise the social consciousness of the importance of being mentally well.
Yeah.
And the subset of that is people's trauma, and stop traumatizing people and re-traumatizing, because I worry about this thing with the schools, because the just even if you never have a shooting in your school, you're changing the lives of young people by all these lockdowns, by just this security, this like, oh my gosh, there's something serious happening. It's so serious, we need to lock everybody down. And the repetitiveness of that is going to cause a response that's going to come out later in life in people that didn't exist before.
Right.
I mean, it's just we're creating more trauma because to me, we're not actually addressing the real issues, and I think what you're doing with the academy, going to the police academy. I mean, I think that's awesome. And that should be just built in to every academy. But we also need to get to every community. And how do you do that? It's massive. That's a massive undertaking.
Yeah, I think we just all little by little start talking about it,
Yeah.
whether it's with our kids or at our community meeting, work.
Yeah. Workplace would be another great one,
Yeah,
right? Because once you go, you get a job and you work in a location, there's a community there too.
yep,
And being able to talk about the impact of trauma and just mental wellness, being well in the workplace.
yes. And to know that it's okay to talk about that,
Yeah.
you know, that it's not like shh, hush, hush.
Right.
That, you know, we're all human. We all
Right.
have our things, and it doesn't have to be something that holds us back. It could be our power, our superpower too.
Absolutely. So if you want more information, we've been talking about trauma responses. I'd recommend you visit the samhsa.gov/Gaines Center website. And this particular one's going to be under the criminal justice section on the left-hand side of that website there. They have tons of information. We're talking about been talking about the criminal justice training in particular, but the Gaines Center puts out a lot of good info just in general. Montana's Peer Network, we have a trauma-informed peer support training that we got, which was funded by SAMHSA. That came from the National Trauma Informed Center. And we did that years ago, and we've been training it ever since. It's really one of our more popular trainings. And this is just it's a big topic, trauma in general. So lots of different opportunities. But one thing I want to say with the different trainings is, I think I would recommend to people, depending on sort of where you're at with your understanding of the impact of trauma, you might think about starting with an entry level one and not starting with an advanced one.
Yeah, I'd second that, because if you started with this one, you might get lost in the shuffle of things. Like if you've never done any training or instructing of any sort, it might be a little too much. So
like a real good entry level one I always ask people about is, go to an ACEs, advanced child or adverse childhood experiences. And that's a good kind of entry level into the world of trauma and what we're talking about. Like lots of statistics and data, and it gives you this broad-based view of what we're talking about to help you begin to understand and wrap your mind around it. And then you can sort of progress up from there and continue to go. I think if you jump into something like this, this is a pretty advanced, as I just look at the content of the training, it's a pretty advanced training, I think. Not that you can't, but you might not get it till you're a good ways through the training. You might not get some of the concepts.
Yeah, and definitely I second what SAMHSA said. Like, I mean, if you've gone through PS 101 with us at least, then you'll have a good idea of what meeting people where they're at, person-centered approach,
right?
Those trauma-informed skills to deal with trauma-informed responses.
Right. Because all of our trainings are based off of basically what SAMHSA puts out, the standards SAMHSA puts out for peer supporters, for trauma-informed care. Our trainings, we try to level up to that. That's where we kind of come at it. So yeah, the Peer Support 101 training in particular, the chapter on trauma, comes right off the SAMHSA website and all of the concepts. And so if you're interested, if you're listening and you're interested in any of this that we're talking about, again, samhsa.gov, Gaines Center, that's the training. And we'll be putting stuff in our newsletter. We'll be offering it. And so you want to definitely Make sure you're checking out our weekly wellness newsletter. And then each week, of course, we're doing different podcasts. This month, we've been focused on mental health awareness because it's May, but we're heading into June before too long here. So we'll be switching over to a different topic, but all of our podcasts have to do with recovery and wellness. And we want to thank you for tuning in. And Leah, thanks for joining me on this one.
Yeah, always an honor. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We will catch you next time on the next Recovery Talks podcast from Montana's Peer Network.